So now we go on to this pot debate. But before we get to it, I found something online that I read that I thought was pretty incredible. It was a report put out by Reuters, which is the same as AP, and it says half of black males in U.S. arrested by age 23, a study finds. It goes on, it says almost half of black males and almost 40% of white males are arrested in the U.S. by the time they're 23 years old. I mean, think of those statistics. We're basically talking about half of our population, okay? Half of our population is in jail, males, by age 23, with at least some kind of arrest. I mean, what does that say about our country? I mean, you know, we're producing a police state. We're producing a state where we live and a country that's founded on imprisoning people, on not trying to promote education, not to get people out of poverty, to live better, to end the poverty class, but to move on that everyone could be a productive member of society, that the statistic, almost 50% are in jail. I just find that astounding, and it relates to what we're going to talk to tonight, because ask yourself, we know that those arrests aren't all violent crimes. Violent crimes is a smaller segment of the overall crime rate. That means the majority of these arrests are probably drug-related, and the majority of them probably marijuana-related. So how many young Americans do we have out there, male and female, that engage in recreational pot, now because it's illegal, and they get busted with a joint or a small pipe that they're smoking, however they're doing it, whatever they're doing, but a recreational use is not a threat of danger to anyone. But now these kids have a record. And now having a record, now it affects their ability to get a job. It affects their ability to get into school, because some schools say, well, we got two candidates, one who didn't smoke pot and one who did, so we'll take the one who didn't smoke pot. And the other person could be a better student. So you have situations where doors are being shut all over the use of pot. And is that really fair? You know, think if you legalized it, you wouldn't have any of these issues. You wouldn't have how many thousands of drug enforcement agents going out there just trying to stop this low-level crime. You could take those police officers and redirect them towards violent crimes, more serious crimes. You could take the money you save from prosecuting those people, and you could put that into education. And if education improves, then we just defeat that whole thing about 20, you know, by age 23, almost 50% are in jail. So that's just food for thought, and I'm going to ask my guests specifically about that and their thoughts on that. So without any further delay, let's get to the debate. I'd like to welcome to the show Paul Armentano and Scott Chipman. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, let me start off with you, Paul. You're the director of NORML, N-O-R-M-L, the NORML Foundation, and you've, you know, really researched and studied all different aspects of marijuana and its use and whether or not it should be legalized. You spoke at national conferences and seminars around the country. And I want to ask you, let's just start off with the basic question. Should pot be legalized and why? Real open question, so the floor is yours.
Yes. NORML believes that in a free society, the private use of marijuana by an adult should not be criminalized. And I want to stress what the fundamental question is here, and you touched on in your opening monologue. I'm not here tonight to debate whether marijuana use is good or it's bad, or whether marijuana may or may not be abused, because that's not the question. The fundamental question is, as a public policy, is it the ideal policy to arrest, incarcerate, and grant a criminal record to individuals who use marijuana? Is criminalization a disproportionate response to what is at worst a public health issue? I believe that criminalizing and arresting 700,000 Americans a year is in fact a disproportionate response, and a majority of the American public agree.
Now, hearing that comment by Paul, what's your response to that, Scott? What do you respond to that position about legalizing marijuana and its relating effect of the arrests that it's just an ungodly amount of arrests each year that involve not only the arrest of those individuals and the impact on that person and their families and their future, but then the cost to prosecute them, the cost after prosecution to maybe put them in a rehab or to put them into some kind of community service and or prison, because some do get incarcerated, and it just trickles down the line. Why do you think it should be illegal?
Well, first, let's get the numbers right. Less than 1% of the prison population are in jail for simple possession of marijuana, and the vast majority of them have pled down for much more serious crimes, and those who are in jail for simple marijuana possession are in jail for pounds. They're dealers. They're traffickers. They are not just in jail for simple possession. So why should it stay illegal? First, it's a dangerous drug. If you want to argue, should all drugs be legal, let's just talk about that. All drugs should be legal, because if marijuana should be legal, there should be not one illicit drug now that shouldn't be legalized. So let's just go there. Marijuana is dangerous.
But is marijuana in the same classification as a heroin or an opiate or something like that? I mean, I think you're really comparing apples and oranges.
No, we're not. Marijuana is dangerous, and it's becoming more dangerous all the time. For the last 25 years, it's been hybridized to get stronger and stronger and stronger. Now I've got hash oil products that are 100% THC. 1 or 2 huffs is equivalent of smoking 3 or 4 joints. So yeah, that's the equivalent of the FDA-approved drug Marinol, which is 100% THC. Marinol is not a smoked drug. It doesn't make you high. And that's why people don't want That's laughable. Of course marijuana. It does. It's 100% THC. That's the psychotropic compound in marijuana. You know that. It was approved by the FDA in 1985. It was downscheduled by the FDA in 1999 because of its impeccable safety record. It's not smoked, is it? No, it's taken orally, which actually makes it more psychoactive. Okay, just like taking a marijuana brownie would be more psychoactive than inhaling a joint. Marinol is a controlled substance as well. It is has a That's right. It's legal and regulated and controlled, like we should make marijuana. You're going to just talk over me. Yeah, we want to have let me ask. Can you talk over each other?
Let me ask you, Scott, because you're obviously an advocate that it should be illegal. And again, just for our listening audience, Scott is the co-chair of CALM, C-A-L-M, the Citizens Against Legalizing Marijuana, and you've been involved in the community for years of why this should be illegal and remain illegal. Can you overdose for marijuana, and can those overdose for marijuana kill someone?
People die all the time from the decisions they make under marijuana. I've got 3 kids have been killed here in San Diego because their parents were high on marijuana. One in Arizona just a few months ago left their child in the car for 4 hours while the father smoked marijuana with his friends. His kid baked to death. 2 toddlers tunneled into the pool while the parents were sitting smoking marijuana because they were too stoned to actually watch out for their kids. Girl can't figure out how to put her car into reverse, puts it in forward, goes off the cliff here in San Diego. I could go on and on. People die all the time.
Scott, isn't that really a situation, all the situations you're telling us about, and I mean, Paul, I'll let you comment on this in a second. I mean, isn't that just really what we're talking about here, being individually responsible? I think a big issue that commonly gets overlooked in this entire argument, I watch all the shows, and they never talk about people's personal responsibility. If it was legalized, let's just make the assumption it's legalized throughout the United States, really what would be the difference between marijuana and alcohol? People get killed on alcohol from drunk drivers every day. People now get killed from people texting. You know, if people are responsible, though, and use alcohol the right way, it's not a problem. You recreationally use it, you're in your home, there's no problem. Same thing with marijuana. If people are responsible, then really what's the problem? Paul, what do you say to that?
I think you have to distinguish between use or responsible use and abuse. And of course, we don't want to encourage irresponsible use. We want to discourage irresponsible use. But look at your example with alcohol. We don't arrest and incarcerate adults who use alcohol responsibly because we want to send a message, or we want to target the fraction of individuals who use alcohol irresponsibly, like drinking and driving. If we're concerned, truly concerned about the potential adverse effects of a substance use on the individual and on society. We should regulate it appropriately, set age restrictions, control the set and setting, and educate the consumer so that they make intelligent choices. That's what we do with prescription drugs. That's what we do with alcohol. That's what we do with tobacco. Why don't we do it with marijuana?
I agree with you, Paul. So how do you respond to that, Scott? Because, I think the theory that, listen, people should be able to make their own decision. I'm very big on individual rights and people having the right to choose. You want to do it, do it. You don't want to do it, don't. As long as you're not infringing on someone else. So if people could sit in their house and drink alcohol, get a buzz if they want, just don't do it where it impacts someone else, then what's the difference with marijuana? Explain to me what your opposition is to that.
Well, there's a number of things that I'm opposed to. Number one, you can drink alcohol without getting high. You don't smoke marijuana for any other reason except to get high. No one is being arrested for use of marijuana, whether it's responsible or you only get arrested for after you do something really stupid. And 50% of the people who are doing something stupid, who are getting arrested for something else, test positive for marijuana in their system. So we are encouraging more use of marijuana by saying, oh, well, first of all, it's medicine. That was a joke. Everyone knows it was a joke. It continues to be the biggest joke in the United States that it's medicine. Second, we are encouraging our kids to using it.
Let me just cut you off for a second. Are you saying that there's no proven medical benefits of marijuana use as a medical aid?
Absolutely.
Is that the position you're taking?
It's not my position. The AMA. Today, this is November 2013, reiterated the widely held scientific view that marijuana is dangerous and should not be legalized. We can only hope that the public will listen to science, not big marijuana interests who stand to gain millions of dollars from increased addiction rates. The American Psychiatric Association position, there is no current scientific evidence that marijuana is any way beneficial for the treatment of any psychiatric disorder. In contrast, current evidence supports, at minimum, a strong association of cannabis use with onset of psychiatric disorders. Adolescents are particularly vulnerable to harm given the effects of cannabis on the neurological development.
Well, I'm sure, Paul, you're going to have a response to that because I think it clearly has medical benefits and it's clearly been shown to help people who have cancer and other ailments.
No.
You want to comment on that, Paul?
Sure, I can comment on that. First of all, the AMA does not recommend putting people in jail for the use of marijuana. The AMA also only represents 15% of active MDs, so their position is not necessarily in correlation with what most physicians think. We have 20 states that have already legalized the medical use of marijuana. The District of Columbia has approved the medical use of marijuana. The FDA just in November approved clinical trials for the pediatric use of cannabidiol. So we know that there is a strong scientific basis for the therapeutic use of cannabis. But what I really object to is this individual's claim that nobody's arrested for marijuana when we know the FBI puts out the data every single year in October that between 700,000 and 800,000 Americans, depending on the year, are arrested for marijuana offenses. 90% of those, according to the FBI, are simple possession offenses only. That is irrefutable. So the question that I have to your guest is, how many more arrests per year do we need to make for marijuana offenses until we would achieve the outcomes that this person desires? Should it be 1 million, 2 million, 3 million? How many more arrests? Because that is the fundamental question. Should we arrest adults for using marijuana? He believes we should. I believe we should not. Most Americans believe we should not.
I do not believe that we should be arresting people for use, and they are not being arrested for use. We've got people using marijuana all over the country.
What are you basing that on, though, Scott? Yeah, let me just keep the debate going orderly. Paul gave you actual statistics, and I think the statistics, even at 700,000, are very low. What are you basing it on when you say
coming
that
from
people
New York
aren't?
City? There were 104,000 arrests for marijuana possession in New York City in the state of New York in 2010. That's from the FBI.
You see people using marijuana all the time in front of the police. They never do anything. Sometimes they'll give a citation. No one is being arrested for simple possession. These are people who are drug dealers who have large amounts. And not one medical association.
Well, I got to tell you, as a criminal attorney for 25 years, Scott, That's not accurate. I mean, there's people busted all the time for simple possession, and if you really look at the statistics on the 700,000 that I'm sure Paul is talking about, a very big number and percentage of that 700,000 is going to fall over into very low quantities of marijuana possession that clearly would be personal use. You know, people always focus on and say just a joint. Clearly what would be personal use, not for resale, not distributors, not big drug pushers out there, but just personal use. Do you think it's money well spent to be prosecuting? Let's even say out of those 700,000, it's 200,000 or 300,000 people. Do you think that's money and time well spent for our police force, and it couldn't be used somewhere else better?
Do you guys talk to police at all? They're not arresting people for marijuana use. That's the biggest myth, besides the fact that marijuana is medical, and not one medical association has approved smoked marijuana for any medical purpose. And
the American Public Health
not even
Association.
1%
I could
of
name
doctors,
dozens.
Really? How about the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry? How about the American Academy of Pediatrics? How about the American Cancer Society?
I'm aware that there's
American
division on this, but you just said that not a single medical institution supports this. The American Public Health Association has resolved in favor of this. The American Nursing Association has resolved in favor of this. So like this issue is divisive in the public, it's also divisive among medical societies, but there are plenty of medical societies that support this issue, but that's not the fundamental issue that we're talking about today. We are talking about a public policy.
Should pot be legalized? I was told that we were going to talk about whether pot should be legalized. It should absolutely not be legalized. That is the issue. Should it be legalized? No, it should not. Should individuals who are using pot for personal use be arrested? No, absolutely not, and they are not.
That, of course, is false. If they were not being arrested, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Right. I got to agree with Paul on that, because I think the whole purpose of the debate is the fact that it's on the books and legal. I mean, one of the producers on the show just sent me a link showing that in the state of Oklahoma, for example, the penalties for using weed could be up to life in prison. Could you imagine getting life in prison for just use or possession of a certain amount of basic weed? I mean, it's just archaic and it's ridiculous. And we need a situation where the times are going to meet. I mean, here's one question I want to put back to you then, Scott, because Paul made a very good point. You know, if medical marijuana was not something that had validity, why would it already have been passed in a number of states? Because to even get to that point, you have to get people from both sides of the floor, Democrats and Republicans, conservatives and liberals alike, to say, hey, you know what? The vote needs to pass. We need to get medical marijuana in the state. We see something productive with it. And that would be after doing studies and concluding that it has some merit and some basis. So why would all these states, forget recreational use, why are all these states passing and legalizing medical marijuana if you say it does nothing?
Look, you're great at filibustering. Well, give me a chance to talk here.
Sure,
First of all, there's a lot of archaic laws on the books for all kinds of things. That doesn't mean any of them are being enforced. And I just read you two statements from the chief medical associations in the United States that continue to indicate that there is no medicinal use for smoked marijuana. As a matter of fact, there are drugs that are based on cannabis. They're high CBD drugs, and nobody wants them. They go unpurchased because they don't make you high. This is about whether we should be getting, as a nation, get high, be high, be unmotivated. We've got the increase in psychoses. We've got young people whose brain IQs are damaged as a result of using marijuana. These are studies. The New Zealand study was over 1,000 individuals, and they showed that as much as an 8-point decrease in IQ up to the age of 38 when they stopped the study, and that the stopping of using marijuana did not bring their IQs back. This is permanent. We just had a study this last month in December that indicates that heavy and moderate marijuana use as an adolescent completely changes the brain and gives it schizophrenic appearances.
Nobody's arguing for adolescents to use marijuana.
Oh, well, then
right. I mean, every study that you're citing, I mean, I gave you the floor, Scott. If I could just interject, I gave you the floor, and you're just citing all studies saying that children shouldn't be using marijuana. The laws that are going to be on the books are all going to say no one under 18 or 21, depending on what the state rules are going to be, should be using marijuana. So every study you're saying goes out the window. Just like alcohol, it's going to be an adult using it in a responsible way. And again, if it's used in a responsible way, then how is it any more detrimental or different than the use of tobacco or alcohol? And the people that do abuse it and do not act responsibly, well, just like a person that gets behind of a wheel drunk driving, if someone uses marijuana and does the same thing, just like the drunk driver, they're going to go to jail or they're going to get their license revoked. The same kind of penalties are going to be carrying over in the same exact way. So if you're going to reward responsible behavior and punish irresponsible behavior, how is it any different than alcohol? Paul, is it any different?
It's a lot. Yeah, let me tell you, we spend $224 billion a year just on excessive binge drinking, and we bring in about $7 billion a year in taxes. It's going to be the same thing with marijuana. The harms will be way greater than any kind of benefit, and young people, 74% of the young people in Colorado who use marijuana have had it diverted to them from people who bought it at the stores, at the dispensaries when it was just medical marijuana. So
would you rather they get it from a street dealer?
They will get a lot.
So would you prefer they get it from a black market street dealer that's pushing other drugs, or a licensed business like in Colorado?
Speaking of other drugs, those states that have made marijuana medicinalized also have higher uses of other drugs as well. Look, they legalized marijuana in Alaska. Teen use in the 70s.
They did not. There's going to be an initiative on the ballot to legalize marijuana in Alaska this year. They did not legalize marijuana in Alaska.
Maybe you're not old enough to remember. In 1970,
Raven v. State, 1977, is a court decision. It said there was a constitutional protection in the privacy of one's own home to possess a certain amount of marijuana. They did not legalize marijuana, sir.
And they reversed.
Okay, guys, wait, we got a call. I got a call coming in. I have Jim on the line from Jersey City, New Jersey. You got a question for our guest. Go ahead, Jim.
Hi, Scott. Hi, this is a question for Scott. Thank you so much for taking my call. I'm just curious that there are a lot of antidepressants that are on the market right now that are being widely accepted. A lot of Americans seem to have no problem taking antidepressants. There's not really that much known about them in the long term. They seem to have a lot of detrimental, damaging effects on people, or there's not enough known about it, yet marijuana has been around for a long period of time. So, Scott, I wanted to ask you this. Do you know anyone in your life or family that's on antidepressants? And if you had someone in your life that was close to you that was upset, would you prefer that they use an antidepressant that's not thoroughly studied, that's widely available and legal, or would you allow them to use medicinal marijuana?
Hey, thanks for the question. Virtually every drug that has gone through the FDA process has gone through a scientific process. It has had double-blind studies, 4 years. Yes, do they make mistakes? Do they sometimes let drugs go through too early? Absolutely. But what we have right now is we've got unregulated dosages. Buy any amount, as much as you want, as often as you want, use as much as you want. There's no potency measurements on any of the marijuana. So, this is not scientific. You don't vote
Scott,
on
I agree with you. Let's regulate it. Let's have a standardized product. Let's have age controls. Let's have licensed sellers. I agree with you on that. Regulation works. Prohibition doesn't.
Let's get it through the FDA.
Well, gentlemen, we have one more minute left. I want to thank you. You've been listening to Paul Armentano, the Deputy Director of NORML, MORML, and the NORML Foundation, who's been arguing in favor of legalizing marijuana, and Scott Chipman, the Chairman of CALM, CALM, Citizens Against Legalizing Marijuana. It's certainly a heated debate. You guys stated your positions very well. I'm going to leave it there, unfortunately, gentlemen. I want to thank you for your time. I'd love to have you back another time and pick it up, but unfortunately, we're in the second half of the show, and we now have to get to the interview that we've been talking about since last week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for being on. I really appreciate your time, and I'd love to have you back soon.
Anytime.